liquefied natural gas or natural gas? That's the question. It's a pleasure, great pleasure having Tom Kirkman today. Good afternoon, Tom, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Armando. Nice to see you again. So looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, that's great. Tom, please let me share one picture showing in the left side liquefied natural gas with cargo ships, and the other side natural gas being compressed by conventional pipelines, only to show people what exactly we are talking about. And my first point for you, Tom, please, is the following. So you have been calling attention to all of us about the option of LNG by cargo ships comparing to the natural gas by pipelines. And I suppose, my opinion, I don't know, you know better than me, uh, LNG is more expensive, less safe, more time consuming, with more carbon emission. What are your thoughts about this, Tom, please?
I would not say LNG is less safe. It's about the same as natural gas. It's simply, I mean, if there's a leak, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to blow up. You know, it's like a bad Hollywood movie. It's like, no, I'm sorry, you're not going to get an LNG container ship blowing up, but you can have natural gas pipelines blowing up because it's easily flammable. LNG is, when it's in its cold liquefied state, it's not a huge fire hazard like gaseous natural gas. So both have its places. Since Nord Stream pipelines were blown up, uh, pipelines are generally the safest and most efficient way of transporting either oil or natural gas. But if there's no pipeline set up, then you can use the liquefied natural gas to take it to a place, a port city or someplace where it can regasify it. But not all countries in the EU have, ports or facilities where they can do this. They're being set up, but both have its place. Uh, LNG is more expensive, roughly, depending on where you go and who you're buying it from and what the resale price is. I mean, China's been reselling Russian LNG to the EU at huge markups. But right now, it's about 4 times more expensive to have liquefied natural gas rather than piped natural gas. The piped natural gas is a huge investment. It can be billions of dollars to build a large natural gas pipeline. And Russia is planning to build numerous more natural gas pipelines from the eastern part of Russia to China because they say it's going to be guaranteed income. This is a friendly ally who wants this energy. And unlike the EU, which is basically saying, LNG is horrible, evil, got to do away with it, all this other nonsense. Until they get cold and there's power blackouts, then suddenly, all that talk dies down. But both have its place. Pipelines are not exactly movable. LNG is much more movable. You can send it, ship it on ships anywhere in the world, assuming that, there's sufficient ships to do it, and provided that there's a place where there's regasification facilities. And you can have liquid, floating regasification facilities parked in a port someplace, but it takes a while to build. So with basically the war on pipelines in the Western world, I mean, literally blowing up Nord Stream, and so many environmentalist lawsuits against any new oil or natural gas pipelines, LNG is a way around it, but there's a cost. I mean, it's much more expensive. And something I just read today, and I was reading on the Daily Mail, a UK article, because the US is not writing about this insane Inflation Reduction Act, which Biden just signed into law yesterday, I think. They flew it out to Virgin Islands for him to sign it. They're imposing. A key part of the Inflation Reduction Act is to push for quote unquote renewable energies. See, I don't view solar or wind to be renewable. It's just another way of, harnessing energy. I view natural gas as renewable. It's naturally occurring. There's more of it being made. You've got what they call renewable natural gas, which is basically methane from landfills and stuff like that. And I don't see natural gas as being harmful. Oil is dirtier, but Anyway, inside the Inflation Reduction Act, there are 3 new sets of taxes that are going to be imposed on Americans, regardless of your income. One, they're proposing a 16-cent per barrel of oil import tax on top of anything that America imports. And yes, America still imports a lot of oil.
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, even during Trump's time, there was still flagrant nonsense that America was energy independent. It was not. We were simply exporting more than we were importing, but we were never, and we will never be energy independent. That's just a
Yeah,
fallacy.
that's
So
right.
anyway, so they're going to tax oil. They're also going to tax around $6 billion a year on natural gas, and they're going to double the tax on coal. So there's 2 types of coal mining. One is, basically above the surface or, on ground. And then the other one is in the caves, or, way down in the pits. So both taxes are going to be doubled. From rough memory, I might be wrong. The underground mining, pit mining, is going to go from 50 cents per unit. I can't even remember what the unit is, to $1.10 tax per unit. And then the above ground is going to go, I can't remember what it is, but again, it's going to be doubled. It's significantly less. It's like 5 cents up to 10 cents or something like that. But it's going to be taxed. So this is the carbon tax they've been talking about. The U.S. administration wants energy to be expensive. Full stop. There's no way around this. This is what they want in order to reduce the energy being used to meet these crazy CO2 reduction, and CO2 is plant food. I'm sorry, we need more of it, not less. The government is trying to make energy so expensive that people are not going to be able to afford it. It's the similar concept of pushing everyone to buy EVs. EVs, you don't have you can't have long road trips in EVs. You can't go driving all day and just keep filling up the gas tank. You have to stop. It limits your mobility. So there was an article that I posted. There's actually plans that they're trying to reduce all private cars to be completely obliterated within the next couple of decades. I mean, that's the plan. They're open about this. They don't want people to own cars. They don't want people to have private transportation.
But you mentioned carbon emission for LNG and NG. How can we compare
Right.
these two?
Yeah, well, there's more energy that goes into converting. I mean, natural gas is just natural. You plop a hole in the ground and you get methane coming up, and you've got to filter it out. You got to separate out the other factors that are in there besides just methane, and clean it out and get rid of. If it's offshore, you'll typically have a mix of water, sand, other gases, and all that other stuff. It has to be processed out, and then once you've got it down to the basic element of methane. For liquefied natural gas, you've got to strip out any remaining water because the water will freeze. You've got to make it basically pure methane. And the natural gas in the pipelines is not as clean as the natural gas that is even more processed to make liquefied natural gas.
But the cargo ships, what do you use to move cargo ships? Which
LNG. They use the boil off from the LNG. That's one way of doing it.
LNG using, so the consumption is much more than the compression for a natural gas in a pipeline.
Yes, once you get liquefied, I'm not an engineer, but speaking with people that have done this type of work, once you cool the liquefied natural gas down to the crazy cryogenic temperatures, it's not that difficult to maintain that temperature. You're using the boil off from the natural gas to keep it refrigerated. So you're using itself. It's like having a self-running refrigerator. It's like kind of cool concept. So yes, you lose some of the natural gas. You're using the natural gas to fuel the ship that's transporting the natural gas. And then once it arrives at site, then you got to regasify it. You got to bring the temperatures up and expand it to about 600 times the state that it's in from liquid. But it gets very frustrating watching politicians and people on TV
that's
and
the point.
they're going in and just saying all these horrible things about natural gas. But it's like, I'm sorry, I keep hammering home the point. Modern civilization depends on hydrocarbons primarily, nuclear to some extent, but it's oil, coal, and gas. We need these to stay alive,
because
to keep 8
wind,
million people, 8 billion people.
ton, solar and wind are intermittent, so we cannot, let's say, rely only based on these two energies.
And it's a pipe dream fantasy that you can simply replace in a couple decades of time, remove all hydrocarbons and replace them with wind and solar. It is not going to work. You can't pump that much electricity through the system. I mean, natural gas is in the United States, natural gas is the biggest primary source of energy for generating electricity. And electricity is fleeting. You can store a little bit of it for some amount of time, but it's not like a barrel of oil that you can have sit for decades. It just won't, it'll go away. So electricity is transitory. Wind and solar are already intermittent as it is. And then when it gets really, really cold, like we just had for this whole Christmas Eve, weather cyclone, which was just crazy here, you get not only the natural gas infrastructure freezing up because it has not been sufficiently winterized, and that is, I'm sorry, that's just bad business. That should be addressed. And a couple years on, Texas is still running into the same problems. The operators need to be held accountable for this. But the thing is, right now, the electricity system is so strained, we won't be able to have this mass transition to electric vehicles because our electrical system is already overloaded, and it's hugely expensive to increase the electrical transmission capacity. So I know the electrical cooperative that I was doing some consulting work at in Wisconsin, they were making it a point of adding, upgrading on a regular basis, and they had a 5-year plan of upgrading and increasing the electrical transmission capabilities. But it's expensive. It really is. Yeah. And it's time consuming. It's not just something you can flick a switch on. Yeah. So yeah. We are going to need oil and gas and coal and nuclear for the foreseeable future. For a long time. And I'm talking decades. I mean, we're talking out past 2050. And the other thing that they're not taking into account is the world population is going to start declining. If you actually pay attention to this, yes, I know currently it's going up, but the rate of growth is decreasing in the population, and as the population ages, there won't be sufficient babies to replace the existing population. So eventually, within 50 years, 100 years, the global population will die down, and at that point, we'll need less energy. What I don't want to see is politicians are basically demanding that everyone reduces the electricity or energy, coal, oil, and gas, and all this other stuff in order to save the environment. The environment doesn't need saving. I'm sorry. That's hugely overblown.
But this is a key point you mentioned. The responsibilities of governments in this issue. What do you see in this?
They're taxing it. The governments around the world want electricity or energy in general to be expensive, so people use less of it because they think they're saving the planet. They really actually believe this. So it's gotten so absurd that coal mining has gone up. The price of coal has gone up, and more new coal is being extracted and used just because natural gas and oil has become so expensive because of politics. So I don't really want to get into the whole Russia-Ukraine thing. That's just a huge mess. I've got my opinions on that, but I don't want to get sidetracked. But I mean, one of the side effects of that is Nord Stream got blown up. I have my theories of who did it and why, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole particularly because it'll just upset people. But it's like clearly any new major gas pipelines destined for the EU are not going to happen. The EU won't allow it. They're not going to be willing to pay for it. And they keep claiming that, oh, in less than 10 years, we're not going to need natural gas anymore. It's like, okay, you guys are just stupid. I'm sorry, you're stupid. You're going to need this. You don't have viable replacements set up. The electrical infrastructure can't handle a massive increase in electricity by everyone switching over to, wind and solar and running, driving EVs and all this other stuff. And I hear talk about electric planes, and it's like, yeah, I don't want to be in a plane that is using a battery to, what if that battery catches on fire? Talk about a disaster. No, thank you.
Tom, let's make a simulation. Imagine that we can reduce the conflicts, ban, sanctions LNG will remain viable?
Yes, because pipelines can't be moved, but LNG is you can just throw it on a ship and send it, halfway around the world. And it's like it's going to get to the point where I can see Australia shipping LNG to the EU on a regular basis as next winter rolls around. You got to remember the EU is this winter is going to be interesting. Next winter for the EU is going to be horrible because this fall, the 6 months ago, they were restocking the natural gas reserves using Russia. That's not going to happen next year. They are not going to use Russia's natural gas, or at least that's what they're saying. They're going to find out the EU. One, a lot of EU countries don't have any natural gas storage capacity. They siphon it off from, like, for example, Germany. But if you don't use Russian natural gas to restock and replenish your natural gas supplies for the next winter, where's it going to come from? Part of it can come from LNG, but it can't all because there's not enough LNG produced to refill all of those natural gas reserves in the EU. So next winter is going to be a disaster. And
Of
I'm just
course.
waiting for the politicians to start waking up and go, hey, wait a minute. We know we're saying that we're not going to need natural gas anymore, but it's like after we freeze our butts off this winter, and it's going to happen. I mean, they're making plans for rolling power blackouts for days on end. And they're already saying that if blackouts last for more than 4 days, a lot of people won't be able to figure out what to do. So they've already made plans to open up like sports arenas and shopping malls and stuff like that for people to stay warm if these are happening. And the ministers, I can't remember which one, someplace in the EU, one of the energy ministers is saying, we have to make these plans right now because once there's rolling power blackouts, we can't, just come up with a solution. We need to have this in place. And they said it's not a question of if there's going to be rolling power blackouts.
When?
It's a question of when.
When?
It's going to happen. And this winter is just the test case for what's going to be the real disaster next winter and probably the winter after that in the EU. So what the solution is going to be, I don't know. LNG will be part of the solution, but the sheer cost and that it takes decades, it takes years and years. I don't know how many years it takes now to build a new natural gas LNG facility, but it's a number of years. It's gotten faster, but you can't build these fast enough, and there's going to be environmental concerns. And any place that in the West, in the US or Canada, they're going to be blocked. I mean, Canada should be
Yeah.
shipping out LNG, but they're not because of political reasons.
Do you believe that Nord Stream 1 and 2 can become, let's see, available again?
No, I don't. It's possible it might happen, but all they'll do is just blow it up again. I mean, seriously, it worked the first time. Russia is offering to start to use a different natural gas pipeline to start supplying EU if they want to. But right now, the EU is being stubborn and basically, cutting their nose off to spite their face and basically saying, we don't want Russian natural gas or coal or oil or LNG. But China's reselling it to them, and it's like everyone's happy about it. It extra high price. It's just the politics are going insane. In the meantime, the world needs more oil and more natural gas. We're not going to run out of coal anytime soon. Not that I'm a big fan of coal, but on the bright side, the new coal burning electricity generation plants, the new generation in the West, are much cleaner than the older ones. And the China is building, I think, one new coal plant a week for the next few years. They're going great guns for the next few years, one a year for years.
And
That's how
are,
they're not on board with this whole Green New Deal nonsense. Although they'll happily sell solar panels and all this other stuff, but they're stocking up on coal, natural gas pipelines, hardwired in place. These natural gas pipelines from Russia directly and only to China. They're going to be the sole customer for this, and they're going to be happy. So they're securing energy supplies, and every country needs energy in order for the country to function. I mean, just watch what happens during blackouts. Everything just stops.
you
So
you understand that the group of India, China, Russia are becoming strong in terms of energy exchange between, among them?
Yes, yes, and Russia just yesterday or the day before, they just doubled their reserves of yuan, the China currency. So they are diversifying away from Western currencies, away from the U.S. dollar, away from the euro, away from the British pound, and they're trying to use the local regional currencies in BRICS. And I'm just waiting. Next year, in 2023, BRICS will be expanding. I mean, you've got Iran that's interested, you've got Saudi Arabia interested, there's a few countries in South America that are interested. And the whole purpose of this, and it's very, very blatant and clear, they're trying to move away from using the US dollar and using the Western currencies, and they want to use their own local currencies. Why? Because there's been so many sanctions. And if you get reserves of US dollars or euros, then central banks around the world can seize your assets. I consider that theft, basically. But what are you going to do about it? So I can see a return to the gold standard, which I think Putin is going to start doing. I think he's going to try and start selling at least some oil for gold, I believe. And that's going to cause
Wow.
havoc in oil markets around the world. I suspect that's the direction he's going to go. So BRICS will start trading in oil and gas and probably coal and wheat and a few other things using local currencies and completely bypassing the dollars. It's gonna be a gradual thing. China's been planning this for quite some time, and they will take things very, very slow. They play the long game. Uh, I believe China is one of the worst totalitarian governments in the world, but I must say they have a better grasp of how to supersede Western countries that are killing themselves with energy suicide. That's what this Green New Deal stuff is. Build Back Better. It's just energy suicide.
Tom, based on your last posts, I could say that you do not believe that countries from the West could, let's see, leave the sanctions and bans. Why?
The sanctions are going to boomerang and backfire and accelerate the expansion of BRICS. There's going to be, I mean, BRICS is the new non-aligned movement back from, decades ago during the last Cold War. If you remember that. So the BRICS is a movement away from Western dominance and moving into a sheltered enclave of countries that are willing to work together, and they want to be able to freely ignore, for the most part, United States, Canada, Britain, Australia, EU. It's like leave them to their own devices, just basically leave us alone. We're not going to use your money anymore. We're not going to use your banks anymore. We're not going to use your SWIFT system anymore because you simply confiscate our goods. We're going to start using our local currencies, and I'm just waiting. It's going to happen. Gold is going to start making a comeback simply because the US dollar and the euro have been used viciously for sanctions against countries that do not politically align with the Western countries. So I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm just saying this is the natural backlash to constantly getting sanctions. I mean, sanctions haven't worked on Iran or Russia or Venezuela. Really, they haven't. I mean, it makes things more difficult, but are these countries just, rolling over and saying, we surrender? And I mean, the US has made it very clear, even after Russia stops this military mess in Ukraine, the US plans on keeping these sanctions against Russia forever. So tell me, what is the point of trying to comply with what the Western wants, what the Western world wants? They want forever sanctions or a forever war. So the US military complex, they want forever wars. They go on. What can I say? That's our government. I'm not really happy that all these wars are going on. But there's huge amounts of money involved in the military. So the US is sending over huge amounts of military assets and money and everything over to Ukraine, which is not just a mess. But the US is now leaving itself wide open. We don't have a whole lot of military equipment left in the United States. They're going to have to start rebuilding this stuff. It's kind of a precarious situation. And I'm sure Russia and China are looking at this and going, wow, these guys are just idiots, aren't they? They're giving away their weapons for free to Ukraine. And they're leaving themselves wide open. So
and it's a big amount of money that they are sending to Ukraine. So
huge amounts. It's money laundering.
How do they control this money? the application is mining?
It's very dark. It's not open at all. I mean, this stuff needs to be audited. It just disappears. It just disappears into black holes. So if somebody's getting rich, it's not you, it's not me. So
It's another, yeah, yeah, that's that's right.
so as far as I mean, Ukraine is going to have a really hard winter this winter, just because they're having power failures, just because Russia is finally getting around to targeting the energy infrastructure during the winter. So Russia was actually playing with kid gloves for a while there, trying to go out of their way to avoid civilians and all this other stuff, regardless of what the insane media are saying. But now
Tom,
they're getting down to the brass tacks. It's like, okay, we're going to take off the kid gloves now, and it's like, we're going to show you what's going on here. So
yeah,
there's no good players in this. Don't make me. I don't want to sound like I'm admiring China or admiring Russia or even admiring the U.S. government. They're all incompetent governments. They're just horrible, evil, nasty entities. But we have to have governments. There's no way around it. Doesn't mean I trust them. So with the U.S. going out of the way to basically introduce carbon taxes on all hydrocarbons, oil, coal, and natural gas, they're going to make those more expensive while financing solar and wind.
but they do the
Solar and wind
same.
are
But they,
not viable.
yeah, but they do the same for mining of minerals for the renewables.
I can't really answer that. I know for coal, that mining, but we depend on the United States depends on other countries for the rare earths,
Yeah,
mostly
that's
China,
right.
just because it's a very
That's right.
dirty industry, and China doesn't mind doing it. So, but yeah, that's the other thing. We don't have it. We can't make enough batteries to make everything electric. We can't make enough
Yeah,
batteries to replace all the hydrocarbon cars with EVs, which is just not possible. So when governments interfere with the free markets, I mean, they're I push for oil and gas. I'm very open about it. And if someone can find a better source of energy, I'm all for it. But right now, I don't see anything that can realistically replace hydrocarbons.
yeah.
I don't see anything can realistically replace the steady nuclear supply. But I have my own concerns about nuclear. It's like, what do you do with the waste products? But uh, it, that's a steady output of electricity. Wind and solar are not, and they're making
Competition.
this low source of energy. The only way it can compete is by making hydrocarbons more expensive and subsidizing wind and solar.
Yeah,
So if you'll notice, China is not exactly going whole hog on solar and wind projects. They're going hydrocarbon. That's what they want. They know this, and they're just happily selling all these solar panels to these silly Western governments who are intent on using wind and solar to replace hydrocarbons. It's just not going to happen. And at some
no.
point, this is going to become blatantly obvious. It may become blatantly obvious this winter. It depends on how cold it gets in the EU. I'm waiting to
Yeah,
see.
that's right. That's right. And the US is different from Europe now is in terms of
Yes,
winter. I don't know why. There's something wrong. Why is so different? Both are in the same
I'm
level
not.
of,
I'm not a weather person. I don't know. I'm currently in Michigan right now, and being around the Great Lakes, we get the colder weather than some other places. It's called the Great Lake effect. But I
yeah.
mean, the weather here is crazy. It's almost 60 degrees right now. I forget what that is in Celsius. So it was down to below zero wind chill a week ago, and now it's all the snow is melted. We had quite a bit of snow here a few days ago, and now it's 60 degrees. And Tuesday it's supposed to be 65 degrees in January. So the weather's gone crazy. I don't know. No, I'm not blaming global warming. This is called seasons. It happens every year.
That's
It gets cold
that's
during the winter time. It gets hot during the summer.
Tom, to conclude our excellent conversation, please tell me what you could say to Mr. Biden, Macron, and Scholz from Germany. What you could say in terms of energy directions.
You need natural gas and oil and coal and nuclear. You do not need wind or solar. They could be nice to have. They're intermittent sources of power that can be added in at a very expensive rate, but you still have to have the base backup of hydrocarbons and nuclear. And there's no way of avoiding this. That's it. It's just the world needs more hydrocarbons. It does, not less. And we're not going to run out anytime soon. Yeah, it's getting harder and harder to extract, but we always keep finding more. So we're stuck with hydrocarbons for the foreseeable future, for the next 50 years at least, unless the free market can come up with a new way. I mean, if they can come up successfully with cold fusion, which they've been talking about for decades, and it's always just a few years away, but it's always still just a few years away. They keep saying they're having breakthroughs, but it's like, yeah, I'm not buying it. So unless we can come up with some sort of viable alternative energy source to oil and coal and natural gas and nuclear, we're stuck with these, unless we don't want to have civilization anymore. So it's if these governments, if Biden wants to take us back to the Stone Ages, I think people will rebel.
That's good. Tom, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure talking to you. Hope I didn't wander on too much.
Good. And good new year for you. With the
okay, happy new year.
winter.
Enjoy it. Stay warm.
You too. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.